Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prizepicks.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 338, part of the CLNS Media Network. If you have time, please subscribe to our Bruins Ringside YouTube channel, where you can have pretty much daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat with Evan Marinofski, Pucks with Haggs, Bear with Me with Joey Capone. We have you all covered throughout this Bruins season. So follow along with us over at YouTube. And if you don't like YouTube, you don't want to see my ugly face, I get it. You can also subscribe and follow us over at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. The show is also brought to you by Prizepicks, North America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download today and use code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. Prizepicks, run your game. My name is Conor Ryan. And once again, we are joined by the esteemed, the ever-knowledgeable Ty Anderson of 985 The Sports App. Ty, how you doing?
What is going on? How are we doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm back from my adventure out west. I was with the Goonies. Felt like for a little while I was helping the Ewoks take down a substation on the Forest Moon of Endor. It felt like a little bit there, but I'm back. Thankfully, I didn't miss much, right? There's nothing Bruins related that happened the past week, so we're kind of just starting from scratch here, I would say. But how was your week, Ty?
It was good. It was get to meet the new coach. You get to see what they're doing. Finally the search was over, right? And I kind of didn't realize how much I was looking forward to the search being over, where we were doing these episodes every week and we're like, well, we like this guy and it could be this guy and here's what he's done and here are his credentials. Like, no, it's good to finally know who it is and put that behind you. And I think it was important to put it behind you before the start of free agency, before the start of like the true off season. If they were entering the draft and still looking for a head coach, I don't think I would have loved that. I don't think that was ever going to happen, but this was a long process as the Bruins confirmed in various answers and, interviewing 14 people basically for the job. You land on a guy that I think we've talked about extensively on this podcast as a guy that, makes the most sense for them for a number of reasons. And, sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. And, for the Boston Bruins, this was the right answer for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at Marco Sturm and his introductory press conference, there's only so much you can really take away from a press conference like that, right? In terms of you're kind of just trying to map out what that coach's vision is, what he's hoping the team ends up kind of adopting in terms of his coaching style, his expectations, all those things. But you can't really glean much from it until you get to actual training camp. You see what roster you have in front of you. And so obviously what they have right now, if you go on NHL.com, at their roster is going to be very different from what it's going to be in September once camp opens. But what was your overall takeaway from Sturm and what his main message was? Was there anything that surprised you or anything that you maybe didn't know going into it? Did you like, I like what his kind of message is and what he's trying to preach, or what he's trying to build here with what is going to be a very different team?
Yeah, he didn't really get into the specifics of the messaging, but it does feel like the Bruins are, there's been some self-reflection in terms of their development model has not been good enough, and they're going to have to find ways to get players in here, to get them up to speed, and to live with their mistakes if it develops them into a better player. Don Sweeney kind of noted during the press conference that, they heard some eye-opening critiques of their team during the interview process, and development came back as one of those things that he mentioned. He didn't get into the specifics, but he mentioned that part of the equation and said Marco's going to help with that. He brought that up himself. So, that means you got to bring along a guy like a Fabian Lysell, a Matt Patra, a Fraser Minton. So I think that's kind of maybe the focus more so than you realize out of the gate, is that like they're going to ask him to bring along younger forwards and turn them into, legit NHL pieces. And that's something, listen, I think every head coach does that when they get hired. I think Jim Montgomery said it, and it's the reason why they hired him. And then you didn't really see it, right? Like you didn't like, I don't want to be
other than Frederick, right? Who's just on like a shooting heater.
Right. Exactly. Like you don't want to take that away from him, but like, okay, what happened when he stopped scoring? Oh, he went back to the Frederick that you knew, under Bruce Cassidy. So like, it's a little bit, like it's always kind of what they say. You got to bring along young players, but it feels like they are going to quite literally task him with doing that. And so he's got to do that now. And that's something that, is going to be interesting to watch here, because as strong as I don't want to say rebuild, because I don't think it was that intensive, but like the LA Kings went from being, kind of looking like they were fading out of frame with Kopitar and Doughty getting older to now they're a playoff team again. And they have been for a little while now. And, you look at what they've been able to do, like Brant Clark and Spence. Well, those are defensemen. Well, like forward wise, Sturm didn't really develop any forwards that you looked at in Ontario and went, oh my God, this guy's amazing at the NHL level. Like, so it's a new challenge for all of them, but I think that is going to be the task here. Number one for the Boston Bruins and Marco Sturm is getting younger forwards to become NHL contributors. They have to do that. It's the way the league is going. Entry-level contracts are your cheat codes to remain competitive, and they got to do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It does feel like, because I think as soon as even before Marco Sturm was hired and we were going through the different coaching candidates and what their strengths are, we said that Marco Sturm's kind of cut from the same cloth as a Mitch Love or one of these other defensive first kind of coaches. That it was clear when you look at they were prioritizing him, Love, Jay Leach even, that they were looking at more of defensive-minded coaches. They wanted to kind of get back to that foundation. And I think for them, they're viewing it as, all right, if we can get the defense structured again and get Jeremy Swayman playing back at a high level, that's our foundation. That's the first thing we need to do to get going here. So it wasn't much of a surprise that they mentioned a little bit about that during the press conference, but I agree. Like, the surprising thing was, I think, how candid they were about player development. And I think for Sturm, when you look at, before we find out what personnel he has to work with, I think goes back to, selling both the veterans and the younger players on what the vision is going to be, where I think it's going to have to be, preaching accountability, which is something that I think was encouraging listening from afar on the West Coast, of mentioning like the practices need to be intense. Like, we need to ramp up the pressure, need to have guys, really be accountable, which is something that I think we saw last year in that season went awry. Like, during training camp, I think we were all like, what's going on here? Like, practices seem like disjointed. Like, there's one group that's not really doing much. That you run a drill and it feels like 2 out of, the 15 players actually made the right read there. And literally, like, it was just like, all right, next drill. And it's like, all right, like, what's actually going on here? And I don't know if that was, none of us were going with the fact that training camp was, an omen, or was going to lock in that it was going to be a lost season. But now looking back on it, something didn't feel right that entire training camp. And so I think for Sturm, it's preaching that accountability and really, pushing for intense practices, setting the tone there for what is going to be a young team anyway. I think you want that intense mindset and that exacting kind of approach for a young team. But also I think it's for Sturm, it's also preaching patience for maybe some of the older players too, where I think there's going to be a lot more rope given to, Matt Poitras, Fraser Minton, maybe a Lysell, maybe it's like Mason Lohrei, who's had his ups and downs, but you're sticking with him because you're trying to get him to that other side of being a dependable, consistent top 4 NHL defenseman. So I think also for Sturm, it's not only getting the young guys involved and having them buying it, but also getting the veterans, the Pasternaks, these type of players realizing that, hey, this might be a 2-3 year retool. It might be some tough sledding for right now, but if you buy into what we're doing here, we're going to be right back at this in 2026, 27. And I think that's going to kind of have to be his first message, is getting everyone on board with what he's trying to preach.
Yeah. And there's also, we've talked about how the Bruins do like the LA Kings model. And I think what's interesting about that is that people hear that or they read that and they go, well, LA hasn't done shit in the playoffs. They lose in the first round of Edmonton basically every single season now. But if you look at the vital organs, so to speak, of the LA Kings, it's a team that, for about 3 years in a row now has been top of the league in terms of limiting chances against, limiting expected goals against, limiting high danger chances against. And last year, they were phenomenal when leading after 2 periods, and they were great on home ice. Those are 3 things that the Boston Bruins, when they were the Boston Bruins that were competing for Stanley Cups, really liked being. They liked being having those 3 qualities. When they had those 3 qualities, they thought they were a threat every year. And sure enough, they were for the most part. And so that doesn't surprise me that, like, they look at what the nucleus of the LA Kings were, their core philosophies: hard to play against, good on home ice, protecting leads. three things that were not great for the Boston Bruins a year ago, right? So if you take a piece of that tree and you bring Marco Sturm over and you sell the guys on, hey, this is what they were. The LA Kings system is what we were when we had Bergeron and we had Krejci and we had Marchand and we had Chara. Like, it becomes more palatable, for the players to be like that. Just the players that, you're referencing, the Pasternaks, the McAvoys, the Lindholms, the Geekies, the guys that are just like, I just want to win. I don't care. Last year was miserable. I don't want to go through that again. I just want to win, right? Like, you're going to get guys to buy in probably a little bit easier when you cite those things, right? And that's part of Marco's job here, is to say, this isn't LA, but this is what we did. These were our core principles. This is what made us a good team. I want us to do that again. And so I think that's where you can really sell your players on. We might not be perfect, but if we can do these three things well, it plays to what you were when you were at your best and what we need to fix to get back to being a playoff team.
Yeah, absolutely. He also needs to talk to Nikita Zadorov and be like, we're not doing the same King system under Tom McClellan. We're not doing the 1-3-1. We're actually going to be playing hockey. I don't know if people have heard that famous quote from Nikita Zadorov when he was complaining about the Kings and how they played. I think he literally deemed it not actual hockey, of their kind of neutral zone trap. And listen, it is not that kind of system in particular. Is not the most riveting product on the ice, but you might have to augment some of your approach. And again, this past year with the Kings, they weren't as stingy in the neutral zone, but still, made some slight tweaks to their structure that, again, if you are the Bruins and you had a stretch this past year where you were so prone to giving up grade A chances, defensive breakdowns, I wonder if you do end up, going with maybe more of a plotting system that way, but it does limit, the rush chances, and it prompts more of your opponents just to dump the puck in. It's, again, might lead to a few periods of hockey where we're all up in the press box being like, we're like Stephen A. Smith checking solitaire, on our phones or something like that. But maybe those are the concessions you have to make just to stabilize things for right now with this decor. So I think that is something that, as much as we all know that he's a defensive-minded coach in Sturm, what he does, what tweaks he makes to both the defense, offense, all that, try to just get more results out of this current roster, I think it's going to be really interested to watch once we do get to training camp.
Yeah, and like this is sort of going to be interesting for them, because I do think that defensively, they got a pretty good grouping, but they need a little bit more. They need a little bit more, I think, especially on that right side. I do not begrudge the Bruins for the Brandon Carlo trade. I think it's a good trade.
You got a good deal.
Getting a first round pick, getting Fraser Minton, I think that's a good trade. But at the same time, it opened up a new dilemma for them in terms of, okay, well, what's your top four looking like, right? Because I like Andrew Peeke, but I like Andrew Peeke as a third pairing guy. As a second pairing guy, his limitations in terms of his ability to make plays with the puck, and I know he had a career high 16 assists and 17 points a year ago, but that's not his bread and butter, right? He scores a goal. It took him a bunch of games to score a goal with the Bruins, one of the higher numbers, I believe, if I looked it up. So, that part of it is going to be interesting as well, because they do have needs on the back end, but they also have a ton of needs up front, right? And so what position do they ask Sturm to say, okay, bring these guys along? Like we said at the top, I think it's going to be the forwards. But what if he says, no, these guys aren't good enough. We need to bring in veteran forwards, and I can build up a younger defenseman. I wonder where he views his own strength at, right? As a coach and as a, he's not a player personnel guy, but he is a guy who can identify talent clearly, based on what he's done with Team Germany and building that team. So he's going to have to sort of figure that part of it out, right? And the Bruins are going to have to build him a team that allows him to figure that out. I remember, listen, this was 2 coaches ago, but the Bruins had a roster that left members of that coaching staff going, I'm not sure he fits what we want to do here, but we'll figure it out. It was kind of like that Tortorella and John Scott thing where, Tortorella sees John Scott and he goes, what are you doing here? He goes, oh, you traded for me. He goes, well, don't know how we're going to use it, but we'll figure that out. It's kind of like that.
Punched a hole in the wall.
Yeah, it's so that's going to be the challenge for them here, is where does Sturm feel most comfortable building up a player, so to speak, right? Is he more comfortable, let's say, giving him a, just throwing a name out here, like a Freddie Brunet, or Michael Callahan? Does he feel better building that guy up, or can he look at a guy like Fabian Lysell or Riley Duran or Trevor Kuntar, whoever it is, and go, no, I can get something out of him? Like, that's going to be part of the challenge here, because that will directly impact their course that they take on July 1. Like where you spend your money, because you only have so much of it. It can go pretty quick if you're not careful. So that's the part that, we're not going to know till training camp, but between now and July 1, I hope Sturm is talking to the front office and saying, I can do something with this guy. So focus your resources here or there. Like that's what you got to find out right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it does feel like the Bruins are at least giving themselves some more options in terms of right shot D. Made a trade on Friday. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But before we do, take a quick break, hear from our good friends over at Prizepicks. Do you know ball? Do you know ball? There's only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prizepicks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. This year's basketball playoffs are headed towards crowning a first-time champ in more than 50 years. Don't miss your last chance to cash in on history with Prizepicks. Pick more or less on player stats like points, rebounds, assists, and more for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Think Shia will get more than 30 points? How about Tyrese Halliburton for more than 25 points? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prizepicks. Prizepicks has a ton of promos, including Flex Friday. Make sure you opt in and tap the checkbox in the lineup builder to be eligible for the protected play. Choose squares from any game on the board. If your lineup does not win, you get your net losses back in promo funds up to your promo limit as soon as the lineup settles. And it's not just basketball. On Prizepicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite hockey players with players from baseball, basketball, esports, and much more. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite hockey players from the ice into your Prizepicks lineup. There's really no shortage of ways to participate in Prizepicks. This week, I'm looking at the board and I'm going to cover all my bases. I've got Tyrese Halliburton for more than 30 points. And you know what? I'm going to go Sasha Barkov for more than one goal going into Game 5. It's really that easy. So download the Prizepicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prizepicks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. Shout out once again to our good friends over at Prizepicks. Ty, as I said, the Bruins did make a trade on Friday. They acquired the rights to defenseman Victor Soderstrom from the Chicago Blackhawks. I know Soderstrom spent the last year over in the SHL, over in his native Sweden. I know they literally just signed him to a contract.
Yes,
1 year to a contract. I literally was just looking down and I was like, oh, wait. So they've signed him officially to a 1 year, two-way contract to the 2025-26 season with an NHL cap hit of $775,000. So that is over and done with in terms of actually getting contract signed. But they give up a 2025 7th-round pick, defenseman Ryan Mast, who is kind of struggling to get consistent playing time in Providence. I think he was a healthy scratch for all of their playoff games this past year. What do you kind of make of the deal in terms of what the Bruins are banking on here and what they're hoping to get out of a guy like Soderstrom?
Yeah, so working backwards, yes, can confirm the Bruins moved Ryan Mast for a change of scenery. Internally, they did not view him as a fit for the Providence roster. And so this was about getting him a fresh start, new organization. Just didn't really fit with what they wanted to do as a decor down there in Providence. So that was the reason why he was thrown in. As it relates to Soderstrom, I mean, this is another example of Don Sweeney taking a chance on a first-round pick. This was a guy drafted 11th overall, 2019. As everyone on Twitter who loves being angry will quickly point out, he's a bust by that logic. 11th overall, only 53 NHL games. So he's a bust, right? But it's a chance. It's a low-risk kind of flyer on a guy. You know, effectively, you traded a player that you drafted with a 6th-round pick and a future 7th-round pick to acquire the 11th overall pick from 6 years ago. In a vacuum, I don't hate that. I don't. That's good asset management in terms of bringing in a guy that you think has a higher ceiling than the pieces you're moving on from. So with that in mind, I do think that it's interesting, right? Like he's been productive in the AHL and in the SHL this past year. I think he won best defenseman.
He did.
In
He won
Sweden.
the Salming Trophy. Yeah.
Yeah.
SHL's best defenseman.
So, you look at that and you go, okay, like something to work with here, right? You'd hope. And, is he more probably third pairing, like third pairing kind of offensive, pushes pace the other way, create some stuff, things of that nature. So I don't mind it in that regard. It is funny how he didn't want to go to Utah. He said, no, I'm going to go to Sweden instead of Utah. He didn't want to leave Arizona.
Yes.
One of the only guys I think that, you kind of heard rumblings about how players were pissed that they were leaving Arizona.
A lot of good golf there.
Yeah. And not a lot of guys, actually showed it, right? Like they all went to Utah and they were happy to do it. Nah, he was like, I don't like this. I don't want to go to Salt Lake City. I'm going back to Sweden. Forget this.
He saw that the Yeti was not going to give away their naming rights, and he was like, "No, I'm picking up all my refrigerated gear. I'm heading back to Sweden. I'm not doing this."
It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's. So I do think that let's be real. This is a dart throw. They are throwing it at the board here and hoping that he connects, but this is kind of where they are, right? Like this is kind of where they are as a franchise, where like you're gonna have to take some more chances on guys that are not perfect products. This is not 2017-18 going for one more kick at the can with Bergeron and Chara. Like this is a different time. And so I like the gamble, because again, if it doesn't work out, whatever. It's league minimum. He's playing in Sweden. Who cares?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when you look at what you gave up, right, a 7th round pick and Ryan Mast, who is on the outs here and just needed a change of scenery, doesn't hurt to bring in a guy like Soderstrom, who again, it's kind of, if you don't look at, where he was drafted, right? And again, as you said, a lot of people are like, oh, this guy's a bust. Number 11 overall pick, hasn't really done much of anything. I think the most he's played in a single season in the NHL was 30 games. But I do think it's kind of like if you didn't have that draft label with him, if you were like, the Bruins have signed a 24-year-old guy who's been playing only in Sweden, who is the SHL Defenseman of the Year, people would be like, this guy we've got our next Forsling. And it's like, right. No, it's not that, it's like not, it's the same thing when it's a 24-year-old undrafted guy who is playing in the KHL. And I get the KHL is probably a higher level of competition than the SHL, but Joe Schmo from, Siberia over in KHL had like a point per game season brought over here. It doesn't mean you're getting Artemi Panarin, but like maybe it's a guy that's worth, as you said, throwing some dots at the board and seeing what you have there. So if you're giving up, a 7th round pick and Mass for a guy that maybe, again, not set in stone, but maybe he is your third pairing type of guy. You hear that he's kind of, he's not a big dude. I think he's 5'11", but kind of is a pretty solid, two-way defenseman in what that role could be. It doesn't hurt to see what he could do. You bring him into camp, see if he's playing better, seeing if the change of scenery, playing in Sturm's system maybe stabilizes his game. I'm not saying that you got the next Forsling on your hand and this guy's just going to break out or anything like that. But if he can be a third pairing guy, can be in the mix, that's more than worth giving up a 7th and a prospect like Mass for him. So I agree. Like it's, I think, a good piece of business from the Bruins in terms of, hey, we're trying to stockpile as many options as we can get because we're going to have so much influx with this roster. Might as well bring in this, former number 11 overall pick who's still 24 and see what he can do here. If he doesn't work out, it's very easy to cut bait with a player like that.
Yeah, I mean, if he's Connor Clifton, are you upset? You know what I mean? Like Connor Clifton was a good third pairing guy, undersized guy. Got better as time went on, turned into he was found money, right? And that's kind of, I think, like, ultimately what you're hoping for with a lot of these guys. Like you just hope that you get something out of them, right? And so that's going to be, part of the challenge here with a guy, like Soderstrom and how do you use him, right? Do you view him as more of an offensive guy? Do you look at him as a transition guy? Like, do you want to put him opposite Nikita Zadorov, for example? You got your big guy and your small guy and off for the races. So we're going to see what happens here. I don't think that's the only move they make on the back end, but if he's your 7th defenseman, because they're going to need one of those, Wotherspoon, I think, has priced himself out given the progression he's made. And that's a 7th D spot. You don't really want to pay more than league minimum typically, I found. So If he's your 7th, all right, whatever, who cares, like, but yeah, like, you mentioned Forsling. That's the best case scenario, that he's a guy like that, where you're like, wow, okay,
What
this
the
is
hell?
something. But if he's not, all right, you waive him and he goes to Providence. Who cares? Like, this is where, I'd rather have a guy like this that is not your own first round pick. Let's just, like, fundamentally, right? Like if the Bruins traded for Jake Saboril, right, and they gave up nothing to get him, and they paid him league minimum, you're kind of like, oh, okay, whatever, take a chance. It's always better when it's not your own first round pick. Is the point I'm making? Like, when, like, Pavel Zacha does not have the 5th overall pick bust kind of label, whatever he was, 5th or 8th, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Like, whatever it was, he doesn't have that here in Boston. He had it in Jersey. He doesn't have it here in Boston, and that that can sometimes be good for a player, to get their game unlocked.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good point. So we'll see what Soderstrom can do once we get into training camp. And again, I think a good piece of business from the Bruins side of things. In terms of other business for the Bruins, as much as I think we've talked about throughout this offseason, and even it was reinforced during Sturm's press conference about developing younger talent, embracing kind of the retool. Obviously, the Bruins have a stockpile of draft picks headlined by the number 7 pick in the upcoming NHL draft, which is rapidly getting closer and closer. I keep on looking and didn't realize it's literally less than 2 weeks away now. So where do you stand on the fact that you're starting to hear more and more whispers, something that even Don Sweeney mentioned on Tuesday, that they're leaving all their options open and that they're also not committed to holding on to that number 7 pick if a trade arises? Can you see a scenario in which the Bruins do, move on from that number 7 pick? And what would be like the right type of player to target if you are realistically wanting to move on from the number 7 pick?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love the idea, because I think this is the only way you're going to get like a true high-end projecting as a franchise center kind of center. Now listen, do I love the red flags of a guy like Roger McQueen in his back? Do I love potentially reaching for a guy like Brady Martin, who I know is a high riser, but if he doesn't hit, are you taking Trent Frederick 2.0 with the 7th overall pick? That's not ideal. Jake O'Brien could go 10 or 11, but if you're a center needy team, he could go 7. Like, do I love all those, potential red flags? No, but I also think this is the only way you get high-end centers. It's very hard in this league to get a center in their prime, hitting the open market. And I think it's such a need for the Boston Bruins that it's going to be hard for me to say yes to any sort of trade here, because I don't think you're going to be picking this high again. I don't think you want to be picking this high again. So I think that you have to take the best player available with the pick. And, if I were to make a trade for, let's just say, Jason Robertson, right?
Yeah.
I'd be centered on trying to give them future first round picks versus the one that I know is a top 10 pick. Because I just think you need this pick. Like, you need it. You need to hit on it so badly, because you are not a Vegas or a Florida or a Dallas where a top 10 talent falls in your lap because that's where they can go and make the most money, right? Or that's where they want to go because you already have a great core in place. Like, you're in a different spot than those franchises. And so I think for that reason alone, I want to kind of make the pick. Do I love the 7th overall pick? I'd feel so much better about this pick, Connor, if it were 5th overall. I'd feel so much better about it. 7th is like just out of the range where you're kind of hoping for some fuckery up top, where like someone reaches on a guy that is projected to go 8th or 9th, and you're like, oh wow, we're gonna have a James Haggs or a Dunoyer or somebody fall into our laps here. But like, if the board goes the way it's gonna go, you're kind of like, I don't love this either. So I see both sides of it, but I don't see them attracting like a franchise center any other way.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. I think a lot of it has to do with, to your point, the number 7 pick, where if it was higher up and you were locked into like a Desnoyers or a Frundell or a Haggs, I'd be like, not keep that guy. Even like, I think we've talked about like the ups and downs with a guy like Haggs. Like, if he's there for you, if you were at number 5, you take that friggin' player, because I think at his worst, he's still like probably a 60-point center. Maybe he's not the guy you can win with, right? Like, he's not an overly physical guy, could be a perimeter player, but the skill is there. That's a guy that you add to your pipeline and see what you have in him. Once you get to 7, you're right. Like, you're hoping for a situation where maybe one of those guys falls, but most realistically, you're looking at Jake O'Brien, who I like, but is probably a couple years away. Brady Martin, who seems like he might not even be on the board by the time the Bruins pick. That guy like might go to like 4 or 5, the way like his stock is soaring. And I really like Brady Martin, but to your point, is he worth the 7th overall pick when he's probably, I think his ceiling is a 50-point second line center, if that, right? And again, there's a lot of value to what he could bring if he's the next Sam Bennett, but do you want to take on that player? Are you looking instead at like Roger McQueen, who people think could be a top 3 pick if his back was okay, but there's a lot of risk there as well. You can't, if you're the Bruins, you need to like hit on this pick, even if it's a Brady Martin and it's a guy that maybe leaves you wanting a little bit more. You need an NHL player that I said it to Evan on a recent podcast. You need a guy that's going to draft that you're going to like put on one of the columns at North Station next to like Pasternak and McAvoy. You need a franchise regular. Doesn't mean he's a superstar, but you need a guy that in the next couple of years is going to be part of your core moving forward. And once you're in that number 7 pick, it is kind of you're inviting more risk and you're going more into that gray area, which is why I can see from the perspective of like you trade that number 7 pick because whoever you're getting there is not going to be as good as a Jason Robertson or a Marty Necas, but like you're still kicking the can down the road, right? In terms of not having a center. Like I get both sides, and it's almost like I want to say that the number 7 pick is not going to be better than like Robertson if he's up for grabs, but you're still not dealing with your most pressing issue. And like, let's say they trade for Robertson. Let's say it's the 7th pick and some other things, and you get him. Great player. Like, I know what's going to happen is people will be like, oh, the Bruins still have their 2nd round pick. Like, they'll try to find a center there, or they'll sign Eichel next year. None of that is set in stone, right? And you're still inviting more risk and more issues down the road by not addressing the center position now. It's a tough conversation, right? Because you can map out both sides, and as soon as I say one side, I like in the back of my head, I'm like, well, you just kind of contradicted by saying something else. But
right,
there's no like clear way in terms of what is the best path forward. But I do wonder how the Bruins grapple with that too, in terms of are whoever we're taking down the middle at number 7 going to be ready or impactful enough that it's going to squander the prime years of Pasternak and these types of players when we can try to do whatever we can with our future first or anything like that to add more talent down the middle. Like I do wonder how they are grappling with that. And again, maybe it's you trading those future firsts from Florida and Toronto instead. That'd be great, but I also don't see how a team like Dallas would bite on that when the number 7 pick is right there for them if they wanted it.
Yeah, and the other part of that like is okay, like we all agree that Sam Bennett is a great playoff performer, a great guy to have on your team for a deep run. Now, with that in mind, there was a Sam Bennett, player, a Sam Bennett-esque player available last year in the draft. His name was Sam O'Reilly, and he went 32nd overall. That's where you kind of find those kind of players, in my opinion, versus the 7th overall pick, right? And so, and I know Sam Bennett was like a top 5 pick, so that kind of runs counter to what I'm saying here. But like,
but he was also never like viewed as that kind of player. He was more of like a finesse type of like 200-foot guy, and then he just became like then he found out what he needs to actually do. Like I feel like again, all I remember from Sam Bennett from his draft year is he couldn't do a pull-up, and that he was kind of viewed as more of just like I don't even know like a finesse forward per se, but not what he has been with Florida. Like this is kind of a mid-career kind of renaissance, or maybe just finding out what he needs to do to stick and be a really effective player. That was never his calling card, like it is with Brady Martin now.
Right, and so I am always reluctant, right? Like unless like for me, you got to have the stats and the physical tools. I worry more about like how skillful are you, right? Like when you get bogged down in like the intangibles with the top 10 pick, that's when I think you can kind of, go in such a far, incorrect direction here where it's like, okay, well, can he play? That's what you should care about. You should care about if he can play or not. And we don't know right now. And this is why drafting is I hate and love the draft because it's such an inexact science. And there's a lot of it that you kind of look back on and you go, man, why did you care so much about that or this or that? If the guy can play, the guy can play, right? And so that's what they got to find out here. But yeah, I wish there was more certainty here. I wish there was more certainty with that number 7 overall pick. You feel so much better, I think, if you're at 4, because then it's like, okay, the board broke this way and we know this guy's good, so we're going to grab him, but at 7, it's a lot of gray area, right? And so you almost have to hope that somebody tilts the board, maybe Utah falls in love with Brady Martin and then someone else falls in your lap and Now you have to watch them for 3 years and see who actually wins. But, the Bruins have admitted there's a lot of pressure with this pick, and there should be, right? 7th overall pick. But, how do you cave with that pressure? What do you fall back in your comfort zone of, okay, we know this guy is a steady 2-way player, or do you go, we need talent, man? That's what it is right now. We can't, we need to be able to win games 4-3 and 5-4 instead of 2-1. We need talent, dude. This is what we need right now. So I'm dying to know where they go. I mean, we got another, 2 weeks or so of waiting, but this is the challenge for them. They have often they've fallen too deep into their comfort zone. And right now, I think they got to get uncomfortable. They got to get a little bit out of that zone because, the way they're doing things isn't working anymore. It's just not.
Yeah. And I think also maybe it depends on how exactly the top 6 picks in front of them fall in the draft in terms of maybe how much they are viewing how valuable that number 7 pick is, right? Because, to your point, what if all of a sudden Brady Martin, who seems like his stock just keeps on soaring every week, what if he does go to number 4 to Utah, a team that kind of has found money with this number 4 pick? And it's like, well, we got Cooley. How about we get our 2C pain in the ass guy and Brady Martin as a guy that we just know is going to be a player, right? What if Porter Martone goes top 5, and all of a sudden that means that you've got your pick of potentially a Denoyer or a Frundell or a Haggs. One of those guys will drop to you. Do you hold out for that, knowing that if one of those guys is there, you take them and you're all set. You've got your center that you want to develop and you feel good about, as opposed to inviting more risk if it is O'Brien, who's probably a couple years away, or McQueen, who, again, the potential's there, but as soon as they submit that draft card and that's who they pick, you're like, they better be right with this, because this one could go south really quick. That guy could be Ryan Getzlaf, or he could be out of the league, right? That is kind of what you're weighing there. And so maybe it depends on, who's available once the Bruins do get on the clock. But it's almost like if you are trying to trade for a win now type of player, the mid-20s impactful forward, the Robertson, the Marty Necas, I do agree. I wonder if the Bruins probably would much more trade their draft capital of, the 2 firsts, 2 future firsts, a third, a second, Lorai, someone like that, as opposed to that number 7 pick. If you're able to do that, I'm be all for it, of just getting rid of some of that haul while keeping the number 7 pick. But I feel like that's easier said than done when all the teams are like, how about the number 7 pick instead? You don't have to give us all these picks. How about number 7? We'll make it easier for you.
Right.
I feel like that's what most teams are gonna do in that situation.
Yeah, if you said to me, hey, you can get Jason Robertson, it's going to cost you a 2026 first, one of the seconds you have, and Fabian Lysell or Matt Patra, I'm doing that. I'll do that. And I know it's 3 assets for one player, but it comes back to what we talked about a month ago, where, okay, well, you're adding a 40-goal player. If you score 40 more goals,
6'3", he's a damn good player.
And if you score 40 goals, you're in the playoffs. Score 40 more goals, you're in the playoffs. And so that I would do. It's just 7th overall. No, because I want to draft a player at 7th overall that's going to help my core of Jason Robertson and David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm, because that is what an accelerated retool would look like, right? It's not, hey, we just sucked and we got these picks and now we're going to trade them all away. No, you got to make some of those picks along the way to truly maximize that on the fly retool. Are the Capitals as good as they were without getting some contributions from some of those first round picks last year? No, they got to be part of the process. They have to be part of the process. And that's something that right now, the first round picks the Bruins have made. Right now, you got McAvoy and you got Lysell, and that's basically it in terms of guys on your roster. Pastrnak too, but that was a previous regime in terms of the drafting. You got to start getting some more first round picks that are hits, and they don't have a lot of first round picks in the pipeline as is. So you got to make some more of them and nail them to support your next wave. It's got to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we will see what happens. We still got 2 weeks to go until the NHL draft. I'm sure we're going to hear more trade rumors involving guys like Robertson, Marty Necas, all that stuff. The Pettersson talk seems to have quieted down. I think that's another interesting guy that has a lot of risk, but if you're also looking to roll the dice on a legitimate top line center with some big red flags, I do wonder if that's a guy that you're also going to hear his name quite a bit going into the draft. But plenty more to talk about in the weeks ahead. Ty, Before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff. Oh, Ty's microphone he's whoop. One moment, please.
All right.
There we go. He's back. Ty, where can we hear your stuff?
You can hear me when my microphone is not muted at 98hub.com, 98 Hub Sports Hub on the air, and on the podcast, the Sports Hub Underground. New episodes every week. So find me on social media as well. Just type in my name on Google, and it will come up all across the board. All good things, no bad things. How about yourself?
Yes, you can read my stuff over at Boston.com, the Boston Globe. We've covered every step of the way of this Bruins offseason, from the draft, free agency, trades, offer sheets, all that good stuff. You can read all of it over there on the Globe and Boston.com. Also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, you can at Conor Ryan _93. Ty, thank you once again for talking hockey with us. Again, for anyone listening, if you have time, please subscribe to our Bruins Ringside YouTube channel, where, again, you got daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat, Pucks with Haggs, Bear with Me, all those shows. We have you covered throughout this Bruins offseason, going into what will be a very interesting 2025-26 season. Again, this was episode 338 of Poke the Bear. You fans have a great rest of your week.